Good morning, everyone. It really is early morning here. It's about 5:20 a.m. on March 3rd, Friday, March 3rd, 2023. You're looking at my screen, but no headshot today. Just going to show screen, and my goal here is to give you like a blurry enough set of memes that you can probably grab hold of it some way or another if you're looking for new themes. Like, let's say you're a teacher. I'm a teacher, right? I'm always learning from other teachers. Oh, I could do that. I could do this theme. I could do that theme. We forget about, like, oh, the solar system. I forgot there's a solar system. We could talk about the solar system for the next hour. We could talk about math. We could talk about this. We could talk about that. Now, if you've been on this channel for a while, you know that I'm kind of like a pinball machine. In other words, when you go into an arcade, there's like the Batman themed pinball machine, and there's all these pinball machines, right? And I'm just like one of them. So I'm not like the universal pinball machine. But I do like to cover underground comics, and that's what I've been studying. Now, if you've been with this channel for a while, you're thinking, what underground comics? Well, what do we mean by an underground comic? What do we even mean by a comic? And there's cartoons, and once you start thinking cartoons and pedagogy and children's television workshop and Muppets, I mean, you think of cartoons as being for kids. And both Jim Henson and Walt Disney, now this is a theme I've talked about, shared a similar frustration in that they wanted to reach out to adults with their art form. In other words, animation in the case of Disney, Muppets in the case of Henson. And we all felt this at Sesame Street level, that there was so much in there that adults could appreciate. And so then later came the Muppets and stuff. So now there's a term for that. It's called Andragogy, which is the teaching of adults. We all learn the word pedagogy. Andragogy is more on the fringe of our consciousness, and it doesn't necessarily occur to us that teaching kids and teaching adults are entirely different. And I would say, okay, they're not entirely different, far from it. They're very intimately conjoined, but nevertheless, what is andragogy as distinct from pedagogy? And I've kind of coined that, or I've kind of dug myself a niche in that I'm a Python teacher. So here I am trying to help people warm up with Python if they've not had it before and they're about to dive into data science or data analysis or something data, because that's big right now. People like to work with data, right? Lots of it. So how does Python help you do that? And a lot of people kind of dive in what I'd consider into the middle of the story. They don't have time to get the beginning, so they just got to dive in. And per Heidegger, life is like that. You're always kind of in the middle. You wake up in the middle of the dream. But I want to take them back to the foundations or back to basics. So I start going through the Python language at a foundational level, you could say. But that doesn't mean it's for kids. Just like when you get to foundations of mathematics, we learn that as kids because that's when they've got our attention, kind of enforced attention. We're in the classroom and we're at their mercy. They're going to tell us about points, lines, planes, dimensions, and all this stuff. And we might hate it. Later, they'll try to come back begging with trade books and lecture series and saying how wonderful and beautiful it is. But we may not feel that way the first pass. It feels more like it's imposed. Well, pedagogy is about alleviating that and make you want to go to school, make you love your class, make you really like what you're learning. And that sort of enthusiasm, that's what we got from Sesame Street and some of those other shows. And I want to salute Andreas Kulikauskas here and his channel Math for Wisdom, because I see him experimenting with andragogy, and he's working with adults, he's working with higher math, but he's not afraid to put on costumes and adopt accents and do things that we would consider antics, right? And it reminds me a lot of another channel I really like, which is called Science Asylum. And this guy always starts saying, hello, crazies, right? And then he teaches really deep, interesting stuff. But he does a lot of silly stuff too. And there was a breakthrough kind of around the time of concrete mathematics. That's a book, a textbook. But also, excuse me, who is Fourier? Let me Google that up here. This is a good one to look at. What we're talking about in this YouTube is teaching techniques and how if any of your life roles involves teaching, where can you start getting some new ideas and kind of stand out? And I'm suggesting number one, andragogy. Number two, I think there's a renaissance lurking in mathematics if we can help people overcome their fear of computer languages, because they have been typically, people tell you they're hard, and some of them are, and some of them are really cryptic, like BQN and APL. I started with APL, but not with formal tutelage, so I didn't get as far as I could have if I'd had like Iverson himself teaching me or something, if I'd been that lucky. So here's who is Fourier, and the andragogy here, because we're teaching Fourier analysis, allows for comics, pictures in the margins, but actually right in the text. It's very much animated. It's very much sophisticated in ways we might think are childish, but really are very andragogically sophisticated, I would say. Now, 52 thinking ideas. I just want to tie this to my last video, wherein I really recommended you dive into D.W. Jacobs, the playwright, very much a student of theater for decades, giving us a really good synthesis of dramaturgy, all the way back to Greeks, the patterns involved. And you'll see in those patterns, you'll see a geometry, one relating to one. Two people arguing is a different geometry than two people arguing with a judge or mediator listening and thinking who's taking cheap shots. Like, I grew up in the world of debate, competitive debate a lot. Not that I engaged in that, but my daughter did, right? So I got to go and actually judge and stuff. And there's a lot of, you could say, geometry in the different forms of debate. So the shape of our conversations, and I think Andreas is working on that too. What is the geometry of collaboration where people from many walks of life are involved? For example, myself, a Python instructor, talking to data analysts or wannabe data analysts a lot, and also a Buckminster Fuller guy. So I will end by showing this new essay that maybe you'll want to dig up from March 1st called Memory Palace Talk. And I'm addressing Andreas and so forth. There's a bunch of us there on this public listserv, and I'm just always representing, coming from this point of view, that the Platonic solid concentric hierarchy topic is at my Math for Wisdom core, but it doesn't have to be for everybody. In other words, we have different cognitive frameworks. Now, if you want to get meta about that and talk about the framework of frameworks, that's kind of what's going on here. Andreas is showing off his technique of being able to turn a cognitive framework into a graph or a network, what we'll call, right? And so I'm just scrolling through this quickly. This is not that you're going to be reading it this fast, but I'm reviewing what we would want as a classroom gizmo and maybe a wall poster or two. Were we to go back in time where you've got your classroom and your periodic table and your globe and your timelines showing the history of this or that, right? Depending on what time you're in, you're going to get different timelines depending, and what culture and what the world map looks like. So we have a nationless map that we share. A lot of people, a lot of classrooms, that's not even an option to show such a thing. And then we have this poster about relative volumes and stuff like that. And for me, these posters and gizmos all make sense because I'm teaching something I branded myself called digital math. But I was kind of a lobbyist for the whole concept with others. So I worked in concert with other digital math teachers because I can't claim to have coined that as a term. But then the spin I give to it, and how I break it apart into Neolithic math, Martian math, and stuff like that, we've talked about a ton on this channel already, right? you'll find if you search this channel in particular, which is where you're watching this, so just find this channel on YouTube and search for something like Supermarket Math, and that's what I'd like to talk about next, in the next video. In terms of what educational supplies are we going to have, like what posters, what movies, what do we have on tap for people in terms of inventory when it comes to learning? And pedagogy and andragogy, I'd say, are different flavors, right? One's more aimed for kids, one's more aimed for adults. But what do we mean by that? What's the difference? A lot of kids develop a taste for more adult level, and a lot of adults really can learn a lot by going back to watch kids stuff. So it's not like your audience has to be rigidly compartmentalized. It's more like, how do I identify the genre, and what are the techniques that characterize pedagogy and andragogy with respect to any number of disciplines. So mathematics, computer science, synergetics, all that stuff. All right, talk to you again in the near future. Bye-bye.